Hey everybody! Late last week, I put out a challenge, a new challenge for the Triple Threat Artist group, and I want to kind of go through what that challenge might look like in your session when you go after it. Basically, the outline is that I want you to create a piece of music, something really simple. Doesn't It's not really about the music in this. It's about how good you can make the music sound using only two instruments, two sounds really. And so each sound. So let's say that in my example here, I've got a bass drum and acoustic guitar. Those are going to be the two sounds that I'm using. And for each one of those, you can double it. So you can have uh, two acoustic guitar tracks, but I want them playing the exact same thing. So we're really just using it as a thickener effect. Um, and for my bass drum, I use a close mic on the bass drum and then one room mic. And so those are my two bass drum tracks that I can use to kind of thicken up the bass drum sound. And then with that, you can bus those two tracks of each instrument to each to their own aux track and or to their own bus, and then you can process them there, and then you can send them to your master bus, and then you can process it there. But the only plugins that we're using are compression and EQ, and then we can also use we can use two effects, so a reverb and a delay if we want. In this instance, I'm just using a little bit of reverb on the acoustic guitar, but we'll kind of like go through how this is all laid out here. So let's just start with my bass drum. I've got the kick mic, and then I've got a hall mic. So I've got a hall over there, a hallway that I just put a mic in, and it kind of just makes it sound a little bit. It has more space to it. So this is what my bass drum sounds like just with nothing. So let me bypass this compressor here. So this is what the bass drum sounds like by itself. And then what I did is I just put a compressor on it here. And this is just the stock Pro Tools compressor. And then what I've done is routed it to a bus here. So I'm sending it to stereo. And that's what it sounds. So on that stereo bus right here, I've now put another compressor and an EQ. All right. And you can see the EQ is not really doing a lot. I could probably have it do more. And then this compressor here is just hitting like that. And just really quick note on compressors. You can set the compressor visually in terms of like how much it's compressing. This output here, right here, that is only sending the compressed signal from the compressor. So I can turn this all the way down to nothing, and right now you won't hear anything, but you'll see the needle is still moving, right? So you can see that it's hitting right around 3 dB, minus 3 dB. And so if I want to hear more of that compressed signal, I can just turn this up. And that's what I've got. So I just want to just throw that out. I like throwing out little reminders on how things work every once in a while. This compressor is pretty simple. You know, we've got the ratio options here and the attack and the release, and then the input. This input knob tells you how much of your dry signal is coming into the compressor. So it can control how hard it's hitting the compressor. So the other thing that I've done, and one of the reasons that I didn't need a lot of EQ on this kick drum, is that I kind of use the hall mic, which I haven't played yet, the hall mic as like a high-end attack element. So when I bring in this hallway, now listen. This is without it. And now with it. Right? So it's especially, yeah, it kind of just like widens it out a bit and gives a bit more of that attack. So I didn't really need to boost a bunch of highs in there. And you'll see that I didn't even put a compressor or an EQ on these two tracks. I didn't feel like I needed it. I totally could. But yeah, so that's the limit though. On these two tracks here, the limit is one compressor for each. So I could put a compressor here if I wanted to. And then an EQ each. So I could put an EQ here and an EQ here if I wanted. But that's the limit. And then you can put an additional on your bus down here. You can put one compressor and one EQ if you want. All right, but I don't need these right now, at least. So that's my bass drum. And the goal is, not to move too quickly on this, but the goal is to make this bass drum sound as good as you can or whatever your first instrument is. Make it sound as good as you can using only compression and only EQ. All right. So in this instance, let me just spend a little bit of time on this. I'm going to start from scratch on this. I'm going to bring up this Neutron 3 EQ and just start from scratch. And let's listen to this. Okay, so I'm sweeping up to kind of like hear where there might be some muddiness, and right there I kind of hear a little bit of like this weird resonant frequency in the bass drum. So what I'll do is I'll just bring this down. And then I'll move on and see if I can find something else. There's kind of another weird one. Let me see. And that one I'm just going to boost a little bit just to kind of bring out a little bit more of the attack. And then let's see about the low end. Whoa. I'm going to roll off the low end here, like around like 30 hertz, and maybe just boost, just because when you get really, really low, it really starts to get muddy, and a lot of speakers can't even reproduce that anyway. So I'm just going to see what I can play with here in the low end to kind of give it some girth. What? That's not what I wanted. I want... So I like that. And this is EQing both of those tracks at the same time, my hallway and my kick drum at the same time. It's kind of gluing them together. I could, if I had any issues, like I've listened to these, and if I had any issues with like, say, the hallway just by itself, I'm going to route the hallway so you just hear it without it going to anything. So this is the hallway without it hitting the bus. This is just the hallway by itself, raw. Like, it doesn't sound great, and I say great, like it's serving its purpose. I just want that hallway just for like this kind of like ambient, like high attack sound. I don't need this thing to sound like a great bass drum all by itself. So, oh, I must have some automation on this. Yeah, I do. I imported this from another song. So I'll bring this back up. You know, I could kind of filter out some of that, and if I wanted to boost anything, but that's kind of like what I could do with it. If I really wanted to bring out the hall, the kind of echo of the hall, I could do that here with, like, say, this EQ. See, right now there's no, on this meter right here, the compressor is not even doing anything because you don't see any reduction happening. But now see, it's hitting there, right? And that's because I brought the threshold down. And now I just brought up the makeup gain, so now it's like bringing the overall volume of the compressed signal up. And now I can route it back through my stereo bus here, my drum stereo bus, and now it'll be coming back through here. But for me, that's way too much. So I'm going to take it back down. So I think that kind of, you know, that gets close. Especially considering that the raw bass drum, if I had just used one bass drum mic, it would have sounded like this. That's what the bass drum mic sounds like, pretty much raw by itself. So I'm going to put that back through the... See, this is what I'm talking about. You take like something that just sounds kind of like a boxy kick drum mic, and we turn it from what that sound was into this. Much more attack, not as boxy in that lower mid-range, that kind of thing. So I'm going to mute those bass drums, and now this is the acoustic guitar part that I had. Started over here. Just a really simple palm muted acoustic guitar part. And again, let me just play one of these without all of the EQ and effects, or EQ and compression that I did. So this is what the acoustic guitar, I'm going to mute this compressor here, sounds like just mic'd. So this is the raw signal. So not fantastic. So I'm going to bring that back down, put my compressor on. So the compressor is really just hitting just a little bit, you'll see here. See how it's just hitting about -1? It's just kind of just leveling off the peaks a little bit. And so now I'm going to route that back through my acoustics bus, which is right here. And the two things I've got on here, again, this is the limit, is just one compressor. Actually, let me take off this reverb, just for the time being. Again, this compressor is just barely hitting it like -1. So I've got two compressors in a row, each just taking off a little bit of the peaks. And some of you might be asking, well, if each compressor is each taking out like -1, why wouldn't you just have one compressor taking out -2, right? And you totally can. You can experiment with that. I find that having two different compressors, each kind of taking off just a little bit, is kind of like, you know, when you see a sculptor or something like that, they're not taking off like huge chunks, right? Like they're not taking off the -2. They're just taking off -1 here, -1 there, right? And it's this process of like just making it sound a little bit more smooth instead of just having one guy just kind of like, chunk, here's -2, you know what I mean? But it's not a deal breaker. I mean, it's totally fine, and I don't treat everything like this. You know, you notice the bass drum I had at like -3. I wanted it to be a little bit more aggressive. So moving on to this EQ, I've just got one EQ. I found that I didn't really need to have an EQ actually on the individual acoustic track. And this is the EQ that I did. And I know that I said in the challenge instructions that I didn't want you guys cheating by using like Isotope's ozone and neutron, which this is neutron, but you notice all these other things are grayed out, so I'm only using it for the EQ. I didn't want to have to redo it because I had already done this on another song that I was working on, but this is just the EQ that I'm using, and I didn't use any track assistant or anything. I just carved this out. And yeah, so this is the acoustic guitar. So I went from this acoustic guitar sound to this with the extra compressor and that EQ. And it's not a huge difference, but when we get that second guitar in, like if I show you what both guitars sounded like pre anything, it would sound like this. And that's just with a little bit of compression. So, you know, they're not bad. They're not bad, but you know, the goal here again is to make everything sound as great as possible without getting distracted about having, you know, 100 tracks in your song. We're just seeing what we can do when we really focus on EQ and compression. And so I did put in this reverb here, just a little bit. So this aux is just feeding to this reverb down here, and it's just got a simple plate reverb. Just basically one knob telling you how long the delay is, and whether you want it wet or dry, and there's a low cutoff. So it's really just sending the reverb of the high frequencies, is not getting the low mud. So here is everything. Here's the bass drum and the acoustic guitar with the reverb. All right, so the other thing that we can do that is allowed is on our master bus, we can use 2 plugins. And actually I usually use Ozone 9 on my master bus, but I'm going to go with the rules here. So let's just put let's go to my dynamics, let's get a compressor. I'm going to use this Fairchild. And then I'm going to just pull up just another neutron, and this is just the EQ. So let's have these two side by side. Let's see what we can do with this. So everything, the kick drum and the acoustic guitar at the same time. So you see how, so the way that I've got this routed right now is all my music comes in through this main master and then goes into oh no, never mind, that's not true. You can ignore this main master and the reference, those are set up for other things. Everything's routed through this main bus right here. But I want to make sure that I'm not redlining or hitting peaks here. So I think what's happening is I've got my levels a little bit too hot. So I'm going to lower my acoustic guitar and my bass drum by like -4. There we go. Actually, I might even take it down more. That way I've got some headroom, because you see even right now at -4 for my acoustic and my bass drum, I'm still really close. And this is with the plugins bypassed on my main bus, right? There we go. So this is called gain staging. We're staging the gain so that we have more room to work a little bit later. And this is something I should have, been keeping in mind as I was going through this process. But it's okay. We can just lower that down. That gives us some room in our main bus. So now let's bring this back up. So I'm just making real subtle moves on this because, again, this is like the entire song that we're basically mastering at this point. We're taking the entire song, the bass drum and acoustic guitar, and we're kind of crafting it. We're carving out any little trouble spots in there. So before any of this, I'm going to bypass both of these. That's what it sounded like, and now with these, this compressor and EQ on the master bus. And once you do this, you may want to go back and tweak some of your individual tracks again, or maybe your buses, your acoustic bus or kick bus in my instance. So that's pretty much it. That's what this challenge is about. Find 2 instruments, 2 parts, basically, and you can double track them or have 2 tracks for one source, and just make it sound as good as you can. There's nothing fancy about the actual music, in this example that I showed you. It's all about just really digging into compression and EQ and a little bit of reverb or delay if you want, effects. But really dig in and see what you can do with just 2 tracks. All right, good luck, everybody.